It's Cageside with John Morgan.
Welcome, everybody. Cageside with John Morgan. I'm your host, Eric McMahon. Before I bring in the man, the myth, the legend, we want to talk about Bellator this past weekend in Paris, UFC 4 on ABC. The Morgan boy had his birthday party. We're going to recap, see how that went down. And I was the third man in the cage at United Fight League 2 here in Memphis, Tennessee. It's a big promotion. It's growing. But before we get into all of this, let's bring in the man. Name's on the marquee. You can follow him on Twitter, John Morgan _MMA. What's up, John?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Like you said, all that stuff going on. It was a crazy busy week. I'm glad to get that one behind. A lot of fun stuff going on for both of us, you know what I mean? But it just keeps the schedules full. Glad to put that one behind and start shifting it forward, man. So it's always good. It's always good.
So there's a lot to talk about, but I want to talk about like what wasn't talked about. This is where I want to start. Okay, so let's recap. UFC on ABC 4 from Charlotte, North Carolina this week. Great main event. You know, cool co-main, a lot of stuff going on, sold out crowd. It was awesome. But then the post-fight press conference happens, and it's this little dirty, secret running around that is kind of brought to the forefront. Dana White is asked about Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor. And I want to read the quote. I don't know. That's the most asked question I'm getting right now. Obviously, the season of The Ultimate Fighter airs soon, and during that season, we will be working very hard to put that fight together. What in the world does that mean? I thought the fight was already together, And let's recap. Last week, Cejudo then went on his tirades about Conor McGregor. Hey, you think you can mess with me? You can't even submit a urine sample to USADA. You talk about my striking. You can't even take a jab from here. So it leads to the drug testing question. You're more in depth on this. What is going on here?
It's crazy, right? Because you're right. I saw the same quote, watched the press conference, and it just shocks me. Now again, it's one thing to feel like if Dana White is bluffing a little bit, like they know where it's going to happen, they know when it's going to happen, and they're just not ready to announce it yet. But that's not what he said, right? Dana White will he'll shuck those questions off. He'll be like, Lene, have we made that official yet? Oh, we haven't made that official? No, I'm not making an announcement. He didn't say that. He said we're working on it. They still don't have the fight together. That appears to be a true statement to me. I said from the beginning, there initially people were saying September. I never thought that made sense. I think what makes sense is either November, which is typically Madison Square Garden in New York, where you have those big gates, or the UFC's end of the year card in December, which usually happens in Las Vegas, and you have a big gate there as well. So November, December makes sense. However, here's the caveat. You need 6 months in the USADA program because he did retire. He did step out of the testing pool. You need 6 months. Well, guess what? It's May. We're about 6 months from November, about 7 months from December. We don't have any tests yet. You can actually go. USADA makes this transparent. You can go on their website. You can search any athlete that's in there, and you can see what their testing history is. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not in the pool, but he doesn't have any tests yet, and we need to see those tests and know that he's got 6 months of clean tests before it gets done. So that's a big caveat in this whole thing. But it is weird to me. I mean, the Ultimate Fighter is set to start later this month. You've got Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler. They're supposed to have a fight. They're both talking as if there's a fight. But there's some things that need to happen before we have a fight. And it's a little bit weird. I mean, it can all change in a day. It can all happen very easily. But as of right now, we don't have a date for this fight yet.
Weird question. Superstars get superstar treatment. Is there a way? And I just came up with this right now. Is there a way that he could have already been in the testing pool and USADA isn't just making it public because that is a stipulation that he has? Just spitballing.
So they do an interesting thing where USADA doesn't comment on anything unless the athlete comments on it first. And the only comment they made is that, Conor initially said that he was trying to get that superstar treatment. Basically what he alluded to, he said, look, there's another thing where, in certain circumstances where if it would be harmful to the athlete to do otherwise, we can just get 2 clean tests and you're good. You don't have to do the full 6 months. In certain scenarios, you can only do 2 tests. And Conor's like, hey, I'm going to do the 2 tests and then we're going to be good to go. And USADA did comment on that and they said, hey, because he commented on this, we're going to comment on this. And we don't think that that's really the direction we should move in. We believe there should be 6 full months. So I think this is a huge kind of litmus test for the program itself, because Conor McGregor is unquestionably the biggest superstar in the history of the sport. He moves the needle so much, man. I mean, everybody knows this guy. He has done incredible for himself. However, he wants to get, kind of unique treatment in this. I don't think the program itself, I don't think USC officials want that, and I know USADA officials don't want that, to give him special treatment in this scenario, because then that starts calling into question the integrity of the entire program. And now people start saying, well, if he didn't have to do it, why do I have to do it? So I honestly believe USADA is going to have to dig their heels into the sand a little bit here. And I think, I honestly believe the USC will probably back them up, even knowing what a superstar Conor McGregor is, even knowing what he means financially to their bottom line. I think they'll support USADA in that and saying, no, we got to do 6 months here.
Now, when we know that there's a testing issue, whether it be he's not in the testing pool or for what reason, why isn't he? And is that because he's going to come up, he's going to piss hot? Is it because he's doing things he shouldn't? But I want to take everybody back to like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, he shattered his leg, right? So now, yes, he has gained massive size since then. Optics don't look good, but I do want people to go back to that moment and think, what has this guy had to go through, and what have doctors put into his system to then make it even feasible for him to jump into the testing pool? So it's not all just something like he's on roids. Like, it can't be just that be your default, even though he is huge.
No, I agree with you. To be honest with you, I actually applauded his strategy, right? I mean, he shattered his leg, and listen, if you followed along with the Chris Weidman scenario, he's talked about how difficult it has been for him to come back and how his body has had issues. So, I mean, if you think of that, you're Conor McGregor, you shatter your leg, you're the biggest superstar in the sport, you want to continue competing. If a doctor says to you, hey, listen, we can do this the USADA approved way, and it'll probably work, but it's going to take you this many years, or we can do it the non-USADA way. I've got this wonder drug over here. It's going to do much better for you. I would say do it. I mean, your body, like, that's your product. That's what you're trying to do. That's how you get in there. So it's like, hey, let me step out of the testing protocol. Let me use this, whatever it may be, to help me, come back. I think that's wise. Exactly. But then you got to get back in. But then you got to get back in 6 months. Listen, I'll be honest with you. I mean, you're right about the optics. I mean, he's monstrous at this point, man. He's gotten really big, and so you wonder, well, is that simply because he's been using stuff, or is it because he's, he hasn't had anything else to do, but he's been working out, he's been grinding, he's been lifting weights, he's been adding that muscle. I don't necessarily want to accuse him of cheating, but I think about, like, when he fought in Abu Dhabi during the pandemic, and there was the whole bubble situation, and we all had to submit to these rules where we all had to be in the bubble because we had to get tested and we had to do all this. And he was like, well, I'm on a yacht out here in the marina. How about that be my bubble? How about, I wanted to, it's just, I think Conor likes to do things his way. And I think even here, it's just like, hey, I want to prove that the rules don't necessarily apply to me. I can do things the way I want to do them. And I kind of think that's what's going on here. Maybe I'm a little bit naive. Maybe I believe a little bit in the good of people, but I don't necessarily think it's just, hey, Conor McGregor's cheating. I just think it's like Conor McGregor is a superstar, and he wants to be treated like a superstar, and he wants to do things in his own superstar way. But that's where the standoff comes. Does USADA and the UFC say, okay, cool, we know it's Conor, he's just doing his thing? Or do they say, no, Conor, we have these rules, and you got to follow them too?
So my first default is not Conor's cheating. I said maybe by the letter of the law, if he is in the testing pool, then he's cheating, but he's not. He had a shattered leg, right? And if I'm Conor McGregor, I'm getting the best that's available to me to come back. Now, I've been in the fight game for a long time. I know a lot of people, myself included, who's had bad injuries and then had to have surgeries and all the stuff that goes into that. Now, I've never had it, but I do know a number of people who've had like injuries and get on, like an HGH, and it's a doctor prescribed, like human growth hormone. And it's like miraculous, like what these things do. Now, that's probably going to stay in his system, I don't know, 6 months, whatever. I'm not speculating that's what he does, but if he did, I'm not faulting him for that.
I agree. I agree. As weird as that may sound, you think about when Anderson Silva was busted, for PED use. I thought the same thing at that time. If Anderson Silva had just come out and said, "Hey, man, I'm 40 years old at this point. I just shattered my leg. I want to keep continuing to get," who wouldn't understand that? I mean, if you have better resources available to you to come back from a horrific injury like that, you're going to do it. And obviously he has the financial resources available to make anything available that's, to him, literally, that's on the planet. So I don't blame him at all. It's just, again, if you're going to take that path and that's what it means for you to come back, cool. But at some point you got to get back within the program as well. And I think, that's a little bit of the delay here. And again, I think Conor just likes to do things in his own way. I believe it will still come together. There is still time, but as you said, it is definitely worth monitoring at this point because we're running up against the clock. I mean, the longer you wait, the longer you have to push it back. And if he still believes he's going to get this special treatment, which I tend to think he won't, now we start looking into like next year and that sort of thing. So we're up against it on the clock.
Listen, I think he will get that special treatment because at the end of the day, they want this fight to happen. The UFC wants this fight to happen. And God knows Michael Chandler wants this fight to happen.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Look, I want the fight to happen, man.
Right.
I can't wait for the show to air. Listen, I'm one of those guys that still watches The Ultimate Fighter. I know a lot of people have moved past it, and I understand. It's been a lot of seasons. I still watch it. And I'm excited for this. The trailers that have come out, the little teasers that have come out, you see the conflict between them. It's going to be good, man. It's two very different personalities, and I'm looking very forward to this season.
Now, very rarely does a Monday happen off a big UFC card that we don't touch on it right away. But I think Conor McGregor supersedes almost everything. And we got to talk about what people.
Hey, man, when Conor McGregor was at BKFC, like that was the big. I mean, who is such a biggest superstar that you don't even have to fight and you're the biggest story of the weekend? I mean, that's Conor McGregor. He's that big of a superstar.
Yeah, it was. Man, the guy makes headlines either directly or indirectly. The guy makes headlines. Let's move on. Where do we want to start? Do we want to start ABC on 4 or Bellator Paris?
I mean, Bellator was good, but I feel like the biggest exclamation point was made at UFC on ABC 4. As happy as I am for the headliner over at Bellator and his brother, I mean, come on, Fabian Edwards, potential, amazing story to happen with his brother.
Imagine
Leon
having
Edwards.
Two brothers.
Oh, I would love to see that, but you got Johnny Eblen standing in the way. We'll get to all that, but Jailton Almeida. I'm excited about Jailton Almeida, man. I really am. So that's why I want to start with UFC on ABC 4 because I'm excited about the future of this man.
Jailton Almeida runs through Jairzinho Rozenstruik. First round rear naked choke. Didn't take any punches. Literally took him down from his knees. Wrapped his arms right around his knees, essentially. Rozenstruik goes, timber, falls down. He creeps up on him. Gives up the back, takes the rear naked choke. It's over in a minute and a half. I don't even have the time in front of me because it was that quick. I watched it with my mother-in-law. She's like, oh, that wasn't like that violent. And I'm like, not all of them are. Right? So it's kind of cool to kind of ease her into it. But this is what I want to talk about, right? How easy it was. The wrecking machine that was Rozenstruik, that everybody is fearful of this guy's punches. Almeida just dove in for the takedown. So we're going to take it right out of the equation, right? And now he improves to 19-2, his MMA record. All 19 wins are by finish. Wow.
Pretty incredible. And you touched on it. Didn't take any damage. I think the stat is at this point 5-0 in the UFC, and he's taken 2 punches in that time. He's taken that is absolutely insane. This man is a phenomenal athlete. Now listen, there's criticism to be made of the takedown defense of Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I mean, we knew this was striker versus grappler. There's no question about it. But if you're that striker and you know that takedown's coming, like maybe you should be a little bit more prepared to sprawl out a little bit and defend what wasn't the slickest takedown I've ever seen. But it just goes to show the athleticism.
From his knees.
I know, but it just goes to show the athleticism and I guess, the insistence that Jailton Almeida has on, inflicting his game, and he's going to get the takedown by any means necessary, even if it's not necessarily the most beautiful technique we've ever seen. It's like it just has to work. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It just has to get you to your back, and then he does exactly what you do. Advance the position, move to mount, force the opponent to turn, take the neck, get the choke. I mean, it's textbook stuff.
Collect your check.
That's it, man, and it's phenomenal to watch, and I'm excited about what Jailton Almeida brings to the table. He came into the UFC at light heavyweight. He took a fight at heavyweight because it gave him an opportunity to fight on short notice. And I thought, man, what does that show me? Does it show me that he's not really willing to cut down to 205? Is he really going to be long for this division? But I'll be honest with you, I think he makes a lot of sense at heavyweight. I think there's some interesting matchups. I look at like a Tom Aspinall. I think can match him in terms of grappling skills and athleticism. I think that would be phenomenal. I look at a Curtis Blades who maybe not, necessarily in the speed department, but at least in the grappling department, the wrestling department, the defensive wrestling would certainly give some, challenges to him there. I mean, there's some intriguing matches, but I look at guys. Look, I think he'd be a problem for Alexander Volkov. I think he'd be a problem for Tai Tuivasa. Sergey Pavlovich.
Because he calls him out after the fight. Right?
I love it.
I want Tai Tuivasa. Now, you love it. He obviously loves it. I don't see that as a fight that we're going to get like that heavy test out of Almeida. I want another heavy-handed banger to his. Right. That's what he said. Of course, he wants somebody who's going to play directly in to the style that he needs to elevate. Now, he wants a name in front of him in the rankings that he is utterly confident isn't going to pose a problem. Now, I tend to disagree. I think that, Tai Tuivasa, he needs one shot against anybody. But, to Almeida's point, once he takes him down, it's almost academic from there. So I don't really, when you said Aspinall, my ears perked up right away.
Oh, yeah. Listen. It's what angle you're looking at it from, right? Because you're absolutely right. It's a strategic call out, but that's what you do, right? I mean, yeah. What do you do? What does the great Chael Sonnen say, right? It's take the easiest fight possible for the most amount of money, right? And I'm not saying that Tai Tuivasa is easy. He's not easy, but he presents the same problems that Jairzinho Rozenstruik does, right? It's like, just avoid the big shot. And as long as you avoid the big shot, you're going to be okay. If you can get to the wrestling, you can get to the grappling. That's going to be your advantage area. So it's a similar type opponent. It's preparing for the same type of challenges. Now, if you're us and you're trying to test the greatness and you're trying to see, where does this man absolutely fit? Yeah, the Aspinall fight to me is incredible. I think that's somebody, again, coming off an injury. So, you worry about his health and where he's at, but assuming that he's at 100%, and I think he would be. I mean, Tom Aspinall has been very wise in saying, look, I'm not going to rush back from this. I know I have
but he's got something booked now, doesn't he?
I don't think he's booked it. He's supposed to be booked. It looks like he's going to be in the headliner of UFC London, which will be in July. Not official yet. So, that may be off the table, but it's a matchup to kind of work towards at some point. I think that to me is the matchup that I find most intriguing at the top of the division. Other than I would say probably Curtis Blades, who, I think has great defensive wrestling as well and might force him into a stand-up fight, which, by the way, not that Jailton Almeida has no stand-up. He does have stand-up as well, but we haven't really seen anybody force him into that position. So I think that would be intriguing as well.
Who knows where either one of these guys go from here. But I do want to see that test because we hadn't seen it yet. Ever since moving up to heavyweight, he's kind of just he's run through everybody anyways, but especially moving up to heavyweight, and the effects on the body when you don't cut weight are astounding.
Yep. He looks good in the division, man. I no longer believe this is a light heavyweight moonlighting at heavyweight. I believe this is a legitimate heavyweight contender.
Johnny Walker defeats Anthony Smith by unanimous decision in a fight that leaves people questioning about Anthony Smith's future moving forward. He said he wanted to take some time and he wants to think about it, but a little weird exchange there during the fight. Why don't you just kind of set that stage for us?
Yeah, it was. There was a point in, I believe, the second round where they were on the feet, and Anthony Smith starts saying to Johnny Walker, "You're attacking my family. You're attacking my family." And Johnny, they're in the heat of a fight, and Johnny, obviously, it's his second language. He hails from Brazil. His English is getting pretty good, but he was like, "What?" I think he was like, I don't know if he didn't necessarily understand or just in the context, it didn't make any sense. Like, what are you talking about? And he seemed to really not understand. And Anthony kept repeating to him, like, "You're attacking my family." Now, for people that may not know, Anthony Smith dealt with a very, very scary situation, a home invasion situation where, kind of a drugged out dude on the streets made his way into his house.
But not any dude on the street. It was a guy who was a D1 wrestler, so he had to go toe to toe.
ended up having to scrap with this dude. You're absolutely right about that. And it was, his family's safety was at stake. And I mean, he's admitted to him that it kind of haunts him a little bit, you know what I mean? And that it was a very, very scary situation. And so I saw a lot of people kind of wondering, like, where's his mental state at? It was wild to me because what it felt like to me was, Anthony Smith has admitted, his recovery from surgeries and stuff isn't necessarily going. He's not at 100% right now. He's doing the best that he can. He believes that his will and his mindset can carry him past some of the physical struggles that he's getting to. But as I was watching it unfold in real time, it struck me as a guy whose body wasn't necessarily responding, and he was trying to put himself into this kind of fight or flight situation, that would will his body to move past it. And it's sad because it was sad to me, because I just like Anthony Smith a lot, man. Anybody that's ever met Anthony Smith will tell you he's just a straight up good dude, man. He's got a great heart. He's a great person, and so you want to see good things for him. But to know, what a dark place that is, that he has admitted what a horrible chapter this was in his life, and he wanted to revisit it to kind of, get his body or mind right. That's sad, man. It's sad to see that you'd have to go to like your deepest, darkest place to get there. And man, I don't know. Like you said, he's going to take some time and think about it. Look, he's got a great broadcasting career going. He works with the UFC.
Phenomenal on that desk.
Really a great analyst. He's got a podcast that he does with Michael Bisping as well that seems successful by all measures. So I mean, he's got good things going on. Maybe he doesn't have to do this anymore, but man, he just loves to. I mean, these athletes, they all do. They love to compete, man. Talking to Demetrius Johnson, a couple weeks back, he said, look, even if I walk away from MMA, I'll still find a way to compete somewhere. I'll do some grappling. I'll do something because it's just in their blood, man. It's who they are. So it's a tough little crossroads part right now for Anthony Smith.
Moving on, we thought we were going to get like a potential banger of a fight that turns out not so much, and he just with flying colors, passing every test. Ian Gary stays unbeaten, moves to I believe it's 12-0 by knocking out D-Rod. Impressive,
very impressive. I think you're right. I thought this was going to be the moment we really saw Ian Gary get tested a little bit, right? I thought D-Rod was going to push him to the limit a little bit, force him back and forth, and we see what kind of character Ian Machado Gary has. But Ian passed it with flying colors, man. Devastating finish. And to me, just won the entire fight week. Like the pranks that he was playing. You saw the little video where he dropped off some pizza and some edibles, I guess we'll say. Just dropped them out in front of his.
It's too funny, man.
It's funny to me. Like that's all. Like I love a little back and forth, and I kind of hate where the trash talk game has gone to it sometimes. In MMA where it's all like gangster this, gangster that. Like I love just old fashioned stuff. Like, hey, on weight cut day, I'm gonna drop a pizza off outside of your hotel room. You know what I mean? That's just funny to me. So he did that. I thought that was, and then he went out there and just wowed. I mean, look fantastic, look phenomenal, and yeah, Ireland looks to have another star on their hands.
Where does he go from here? Like how, like D-Rod not too long ago was looking like, so where are we going from here next?
Well, I love the call out that he had. Ian Gary said, like, give me Neil Magny next. And I love that because Neil Magny is not a guy that you fight if you don't believe that you're destined. I mean, gatekeeper, I think, is an apt word. I hate it because in a lot of ways people see that, they hear the term gatekeeper and they use it as a negative thing, but it's not to me. It's like, look, if you believe that you're at the upper echelon of this division, you're going to have to get past a very durable Neil Magny. Maybe not the flashiest guy in the division, maybe not the biggest talker in the division, but just an outstanding veteran. And I kind of like the way Ian has approached things. He said, listen, I think I'm going to be world champion. I know I'm going to be world champion. I know I'm going to be the greatest, but I'm not in a rush to get there. I want to build my way there. And I like that. He's like, give me 2 guys in the top 15, give me 2 guys in the top 10, then give me 2 guys in the top 5, and then I'll take on the champion. And I like that approach. So if you're using that approach, which is I'm not trying to just skyrocket up to the top of the division, but I'm looking to try to build my way up to it, then I think Neil Magny is a proper next step. So I like the call out that he had here, and I hope that's the fight that comes together.
Unlike what we just saw with Max Holloway's last opponent, where it's like, okay, let's throw him at Max Holloway and see where we're at, right?
That's it. That's tough. So look, and look, and I get it. I understand why people want to rush. And look, you and I have talked about this before in all aspects of the game, right? Whether it be amateurs wanting to turn pros, whether it be pros wanting to get to the UFC. It's like look, it's hard not to rush it because with each level up that you take, more money comes in and more notoriety comes in, and that's why you want to do it. But if you stay there a little bit longer at those lower levels, if you build yourself to that moment, then you're more ready, right? It's like, do you want to get there or do you want to stay there? That's the question that's always there. And I think Ian Machado Gary wants to stay there, and so he's not in a rush to like, let me just jump to the very top of the division. And I like that approach.
And that's ultra confidence in the trajectory of your career. Now, kind of last thing I want to touch on, the UFC on ABC4 was Matt Brown makes history here. How can you not be happy for just an OG?
I mean, dude, if you're not a fan of Matt Brown, you just don't like MMA, man. I mean, this dude has been around forever, and he comes out there looking for violence every single time. I mean, he comes out looking to scrap. To dispatch of a very, very durable veteran in Court McGee like that, where it just flattened him with a big shot, and Court just goes straight to his back and doesn't even like try to get back up. I mean, he knows it was stellar. And then he had this amazing quote afterwards where Matt Brown said, the only thing I hate about this is that, I got to get out of this cage in like 30 seconds and I have to walk out of here. Like, he lives in that cage. He wants to be in that octagon all the time. I mean, look, into his 40s now, but ties Derek Lewis for the all-time most knockouts in UFC history. And he says, look, I want to come back. I tied for the record. I want to get the record. I want to come back and get it. Look, and
it's just 13, correct?
Correct. Incredible record. And man, just an incredible dude, man. Just a fun guy to watch fight. And I'll sign up for him competing anytime. So I look forward to him coming back.
And he may have, I mean, I guess we put Ngannou against Reem up there, but that elbow of one of the most vicious knockouts in UFC history, that elbow knockout of Diego Sanchez, where he just literally measures it with his hand and then bam over the top. And it was just the way Diego fell was scary. And like the pure measured approach and being like, it's coming in 3, 2, 1, boom, right? You know what I mean? That may be one of the greatest knockouts or scariest in UFC history.
It truly is, man. The highlight reel that he's brought to the table is unbelievable, man. Matt Brown is just, as you said, he's an OG, man. He really is.
Alrighty, and then Conor McGregor obviously has to chime in on that. We talk a lot about Conor McGregor. He's like, oh, well, I'm only 36 and he's already 40. I'm going to get that record now.
See? Conor McGregor he knows how to interject himself. He knows how to get some headlines.
Absolutely does. So, quickly, I just want to say that, this Bellator card is always fun in Paris. I think these international cards are pretty fun, but is there a possibility that we have brothers holding titles in 2 different organizations?
It's incredible, man. I love this weekend because you had a European Bellator show. You had an early day show in Charlotte with the UFC. So we had daytime MMA, which I loved. I mean, I still get to have the evening with my families. This card, it was entertaining. As you said, a great crowd over in Paris. Ended with a couple of decisions. So it didn't necessarily have the exclamation points on some of these results that you wouldn't want, which is why I wanted to start with UFC on ABC4 because I felt like it had those exclamation points. But you still did have some very important results. I mean, Douglas Lima came back, got the win after all the losses he had. Brent Primus had an amazing result against Mansour Barnoui. And as you said, Fabian Edwards, the win over a legend, I think, in Gegard Mousasi, a guy that I think maybe doesn't necessarily get all the respect that he deserves because he spent so much of his time fighting outside of the UFC. But a big win for Fabian Edwards. You could tell he's kind of walking around with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, the same way his brother Leon did, where he's like, hey, man, I know I had my setbacks and you counted me out. Everybody counted me out. And I'll be honest with you, I was probably one of those guys, too, that was like he had a couple losses and I thought, yeah, I guess he's not going to be quite as good. And he used that. And he said, man, I went back into the gym. I used that as motivation. And I knew I needed to get better. And I got better and I got better and I got better. And now, I've willed my way to the top. And he's had, some big wins. And he's earned himself a title shot. And if he could win, I mean, for him and his brother, I mean, what history that would be for him to be a champion at the same time as Leon Edwards in the UFC. Incredible. 2 brothers, the 2 biggest promotions on the planet, champions. It would be amazing. And it's funny because I said I was probably in the wrong and I counted him out. And in my head, as I'm saying that, I'm like, yeah, but he's got to beat Johnny Eblen. But when I think about Leon, I was like, yeah, but he's got to beat Kamaru Usman, man. You know what I mean? But guess what? He did it. And then he came back and did it again. So, man, I probably counted his brother out. I'm probably counting him out. And they continue to prove the world wrong. So, I mean, can you
look at me
that?
now?
I'm telling you, can you imagine that? Not only, and as I sit here and talk about it, I get even more excited about it because it's one thing to say two brothers as major champions. I mean, that is incredible. That would be history in itself. Two brothers as champions in major organizations, major global organizations. But those would not be just like, well, we just came up with this division and we gave him the first title shot. I mean, you would be taking off like literal pound for pound greats, you know. I mean, in Usman and Eblen, man, those are both two of the. Johnny Eblen may not get the respect that he deserves. You know, maybe he's not a household name, but anybody that's watched him compete knows what a challenge he is, man, and how good he is. My goodness, what incredible accomplishments that would be for both these guys.
Do we like? I want to talk about. Yes, to all the above. I really want to go. I want to switch topics a little bit. But first, I got to say this. UFC on ABC4. The prelims were on ESPN. The main card was on ABC midday Saturday afternoon. And anybody saying that MMA hasn't arrived or it's still fringe or it's whatever, I'm going to call you crazy. What an accomplishment this is for mixed martial arts. I would say just UFC, but for me, it's everything. That is amazing. Prelims Saturday afternoon on ABC or on ESPN. Then the main card is on ABC. Man, brother, we've been here since the beginning covering this sport. How awesome is that?
I love it. I absolutely love it. To see it on network television, to see how accepted it is. Because you're right, man. I mean, I remember a day when we were arguing that the sport should even exist, right? Where people are like, oh, this should be illegal, man. I can't believe they're doing this. It's like, no, man, it's really actually a really good sport. And there's a lot of really amazing things to it. And now to see it's on network television in the middle of the afternoon, I mean, unbelievable. And you're right. I love to see it. ESPN and network television in the same day. I mean, that's incredible. And I agree. It's the sport as a whole. Yes, the UFC is the leading brand, but it's the whole, you know, rising tide, raising all ships, right? I mean, it really does. It's good for the sport as a whole. It helps the sport grow as in total. So unbelievable. I love seeing it when this happens.
So we are entering, even though there's fights every weekend, we're entering this kind of little dead zone, right? Because there's not a lot of high profile. I think the next pay-per-view is still another 3 weeks away. And then that's a card that has kind of been dismantled a little bit. And there's not a lot of fan value behind the Amanda Nunes since, you know, the Venezuelan Vixen had to drop out due to injury. So it poses a question, and I saw this on Twitter, and I want to bring it here, and I just want to discuss it. I think I know how we're both going to respond to this, but I'm kind of curious. Maybe we get some Twitter responses, some comments in the comment section. Is it better to have fights every weekend with names that we might not know or might be excited about, but yet we get MMA? Or should they be a little less frequent with a lot more excitement behind it?
Yeah, I saw this question as well, and I understand the idea behind it, right? And it's saying that there's some of these shows that, man, I'm just not quite as excited as I should be. You know, I want everything to be a blockbuster, but and I think you're right. I think we'll lean on the same way, I'm guessing. But for me, I want MMA every week, man. I want to see shows every single week. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, I just love watching fights. It's my sport. You know what I mean? Like, I want to see it as much as possible. But number two, from a more practical standpoint, is that these are what gives these athletes opportunities to make a living and to continue to get better. And that's how we continue to find the elite level. You know, I look at it, the way things have changed to me a little bit is that, listen, in the early days of sport, when there was a UFC like every 3 months or whatever, it was like every UFC card was like the Super Bowl, right? I mean, there were only a couple of them a year, and you were like, man, you built up to it. And by the time the fight came around, you knew every fight on the card, and you had broken down every fight and every matchup, and you had gone over it over and over in your head. Now, you know, there's some UFCs that are kind of like Tuesday night regular season games. You know what I mean? Not everything is going to be the playoffs. Not everything is going to be the NBA finals. Not everything is going to be, you know, some of the things are just going to be a regular season matchup that needs to happen. But by doing that, you give these athletes opportunities to make a living, which is good, because the less fight cards you have, that means the less roster spots you have, the less opportunities you have for people to actually make a living at this. And it gives, you know, more fighters opportunities to you know, prove that they are set, to separate themselves from everybody else, to get to the top. So I look, I like MMA every week. I just think that the viewers and the fans have to understand that, hey, yes, some cards are going to be of more importance and more value than the others, and you should probably invest your attention and your energy accordingly.
Okay, I agree, but I agree kind of for a different reason. Now, like, listen, I want fighters to make money. I want, like, that goes without saying. You know what I like to do on Saturdays? Is I like to sit down and scroll for TV. Right now, Saturday night, I put the kids to bed. I'm gonna lay back. I'm gonna start scrolling the channels for TV, and you know what? If there's MMA on, I'm gonna watch it.
Right.
I might not be jazzed and be like, I can't wait for Saturday night. Like, I just can't wait. Like with some of these cards, we get that way. I don't have to be that way. It's kind of like, listen, I'm a football fan, right? I love watching college football, and I might not be excited about Nebraska versus Iowa. It may not move the needle, but guess what? If I flip past it and it's on, I'm sitting down and watching it. And then I'm going to get invested. And because I'm a fan of college football, I am a fan of mixed martial arts. And so I'm going to watch it because guess what? It's probably going to beat out, in my opinion, it's definitely beating out Saturday Night Live. It's definitely beating out like whatever network show they're on or whatever something might be on HBO. And for that reason, I want it every single weekend because no matter what, even though I might not be clamoring for it on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, Thursday, even a Friday night, by the time Saturday night rolls around, I'm like, hell yes, we got the UFC on. I'm watching.
It's our sport, man. You said it, man. That's the stuff that we like to watch. And I think it's important to realize, too, that when you look at it from that attention, that, look, there are organizations outside of the UFC. I mean, we talked about this a lot, right? Whether it be Bellator, whether it be PFL, whether it be One Championship, whether it be any organization on the planet, there are good athletes and entertaining fighters within those organizations. It doesn't just have to be the UFC. I mean, does the UFC have the deepest roster on the planet? Absolutely. Without question, man. They have the deepest roster. But does that mean at the top of these other, organizations, are there not elite level athletes, entertaining athletes? There absolutely are. There's people worth watching. And man, for me, you know me, man, I love watching the regional organizations. I love, putting my eye on somebody else on UFC Fight Pass, CFFC, where you're like, ooh, that's somebody I want to watch because I think they're going to be good one day. I'm going to see them at the top level, and you can see their story from the beginning. So, yeah, I'm with you, man. I get it. I understand the sentiment behind saying, man, what is this card that doesn't have, everything's a title fight or everything's a number one contender fight? I get it. You want to see the superstars every week, but man, those superstars have to develop into superstars. They have to get the experience out there. They have to get the opportunities. And the way you do that is by having fights every weekend.
Yep, and it's just for fan value. I like watching people punch each other in the face, right? Superstar or not. I enjoy that. I scroll it on Twitter. I watch knockout fights on Twitter. I just like everything about it. Like I was having this conversation with my mother. She's like, "Oh my God." I go, "Don't lie. You like it too. This is like we are like born this way." And she's like, "I ain't born that way." And I'm like, "Well, I am. Like I can't."
Well, I am. This is what I
am. Just bleed. You know what I mean? But you're speaking
you.
about outside of the organization. I actually reffed a pretty cool card this weekend.
Yeah.
Talked about it a little bit last week. United Fight League had their second ever show, got the call to ref. And man, what a class act organization that was.
Pretty cool organization, man. I'm kind of excited to hear about your experience because I've talked to them a little bit about what they're trying to accomplish. I mean, they're it's another fight organization, but they really have a mission behind it as well, right?
And that's what I wanted to get into.
It's just pretty cool. Look, it's not going to be an easy undertaking for sure, man. It's a big undertaking, but the guys behind it, man, they seem to be really invested in it. There's some good names in it, so it's a pretty cool organization.
So the mission behind it, and this is what I wanted to touch on, because we were talking about, and I'm going to segue this into the talking points about like why a MMA, a fighters union, probably just can't happen. Now let's take the approach that this United Fight League is doing, right? So what the United Fight League is doing is saying, guess what? If you sign with us and you're under contract, we provide your health insurance and your life insurance. You have life insurance underneath us as well, right? So not just on fight night, just not in the weeks leading up to the fight. If you're on a 3-fight contract, then all those, you have health insurance with them the entire time, whether you're training or not. Also, you get shares in the company. The longer you're with them, the more stake you have in the company. I just think it's pretty cool. So if I'm going to take my business hat and put it on, right? And I always say, listen, guys, like an MMA union, I just don't see how that's going to happen, because you have promotions, you have different fighters that are being represented by agents, by management companies. With promotions, this promotion may kick in, that one's not. Like, and guess what? There's always going to be scabs, especially in this day and age. Then you look at a kind of a refreshing, albeit not easy. I don't know if it's going to be successful, but a United Fight League who says, you know what? We're just going to house it under our banner, life insurance, health insurance, and we're going to give you, options in the company. I think it's pretty damn cool.
I think it's really cool. You know what I mean? And it's a differentiator, number one, but it's cool. And it's look, if you're a free agent on the market and you're looking at different organizations, now obviously if somebody's going to pay you 10 times the money United Fight League is going to pay you, go, well, I'll take that opportunity over there. But if the money's comparable, you know what I mean? If the offer on the table is comparable, but you're like, oh, by the way, they're going to provide me insurance, which is not cheap, especially as a professional fighter. I mean, you imagine what, the policies are going to be underwritten at, that somebody's going to give that to you. And then, as you said, give you shares in the company, so you really are having value in seeing this promotion succeed, because you're going to get paid back on that on the back end, you hope, at some point. I mean, that's an unbelievable, target for them to try and gain. As you said, it's an uphill battle. It just is. It's an uphill battle. And that doesn't mean, we're saying they can't succeed or don't want to succeed. Absolutely want everybody to succeed. It's an uphill battle, but it's one worth fighting, man. I love the mission that they're going out there with, and they've put on a couple big shows so far. I mean, you got to witness it firsthand. They're bringing in big names. They've got a competitive product out there, and they've got big plans. You know what I mean? They really do have big plans to try to grow this thing, and they got some big names attached to it as well. So pretty cool to see what they're trying to do.
Frank Mir and Rampage were both there. I got a chance to interview Rampage earlier in the week. You can check it out on grindcitymedia.com or go to mixedmartialarts.com. It's up there. One, his head is huge. But I want to talk about Frank Mir. Like Rampage was cool as hell. Like, you could just hang out with Rampage on that. But then when I got to meet Frank Mir on Saturday, one, cool as hell. I have never seen somebody with a fist the size of Frank Mir's fist. This dude was twice as big as I ever thought he was going to be. Like, and just like round, the denseness in this man. And I took a picture with him, and we kind of both put up our fists, and my wife was there. And this is no joke, his fist is as big as my wife's face.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, man. He's a big dude and a good dude, man. It's I've had a chance to actually call some fights. So obviously, I covered his career for a lengthy time in the UFC, but I actually had a chance to call some fights with him here. So I got to work with him at the broadcast table, which was a lot of fun as well. And had a chance, obviously, to see his daughter coming up here in Las Vegas as well, which it sounds like, the plan is for them to both compete on a United Fight League card. It'll be Frank Mir's retirement fight, his daughter Bella, who's an absolute stud athlete, who looks like she's going to have great things ahead of her in the mixed martial arts realm. They're going to compete on the same card. Pretty excited to see that play out, man. And that's another big thing that United Fight League is doing. But yeah, Frank's a good dude, man. Just, really came up during an era of the sport, battled through some issues, and was always dangerous, in the UFC cage, and just a good guy, man. And a phenomenal analyst as well. It's always fun to just sit and talk MMA with him.
So I had a chance before these fights, is we kind of like just were kicking it cage side, and we were trying to just BSing for like 30 minutes. You know how you just kind of sit cage side waiting for the show to happen, and you're just BSing. And Bella comes up, his daughter, and I kind of say and it's kind of cool that she got an NIL deal out of the UFC. And like, was it like a wink, wink and a nod of saying, hey, don't forget who helped you out first? He's like, yeah, probably. You know what I mean? But they also want to get in the game. But he said that he is convinced that she can be like highly competitive right now, like top 5.
I would agree. She's phenomenal. She's really, really good. The rest of him, and she knew, I mean, obviously you say, okay, well, her dad was, amazing. She's got this great gene pool that she's coming from. She's had access to high level training her entire life, but it's super cool because, it was never a thing where like Frank tried to guide her to it. It was just something that she wanted to do. She was passionate about it. She was committed to it, and she's put in the work. I mean, she's still, I think, just 20 at this point, super young, but I mean, you look at what she accomplished as a wrestler in the state of Nevada. Now she's, at the collegiate level as well, doing great things. And she has the guidance of her father, who has literally been there, done that at the highest level, seen everything, knows exactly how to coach her, how to approach her. I mean, look, I think there are great things on the table for Bella Mir. There's no question about it. And she's a great athlete. I mean, to watch her in the room, unbelievable. I had the opportunity to watch her train a couple of times with Robert Drysdale's academy and seeing the jiu-jitsu. And man, she is a phenomenal grappler, and she's just a hard worker, man. And that's what it takes, right? It's not just athleticism. It's not just, hey, I want to do this, but it's that commitment and that grind, right? Where you're going in there and you're putting in the sweat equity on the mats. And she goes out there and does that. So I'm excited to see what she can accomplish.
Yeah, and that'd be super cool if he could have a retirement fight in here on the card, because Rampage told me his mouth to my ears. I was talking to him Saturday, and he says on a UFL card coming up, maybe early next year, his son Rajah Jackson and him are going to fight on the same card for a United Fight League, where it's going to be his retirement fight as well. Imagine if we could get that in the same night. How cool would that be?
Pretty cool, man. Yeah, I heard that was the intention as well, and I love it. I just love it for both these athletes, right? That they get to compete on a card with their child, their son, their daughter, and to do it like that. I know how much it meant to Frank Mir when Bella was in his corner, for instance. It didn't go his way that night, but I mean, the whole fight week, it just meant so much to have her around, and so for them to compete on the same card, I think would be awesome, man. It'd be a night that we definitely want to tune into, and just special for them. You know what I mean? Like when you've done everything, I mean, you talk about Frank Mir, you talk about Rampage Jackson, you talk about, champions at the highest levels, but they've accomplished everything. You know what I mean? There's nothing else that they need to do, but that would just be such a special moment for them, right? To be on the card with their child. Pretty cool to see, man. I'm anxious I hope that both those come together.
That'd be cool. Last, before we get out of here, you had the video game truck show up at the Morgan household for your boy's birthday party. How'd that go?
It was fun, man. Yeah, my kid's 11th birthday was this past weekend, and we had the video game truck show up, and everybody come over. My mom came in town from Dallas, so it was cool to have some family in town. It was, Mother's Day this past weekend as well, so it was just a lot of good, fun, personal times, man. It was a crazy, crazy week. But man, those are the moments that matter, right? Like I didn't get to go out to Charlotte for that event. I mean, it was cool. But those are the reasons I want to stay home, to be able to be there. Hey, it's my kid's birthday. Let's not celebrate a week later. Yeah, I've done that a lot over the years, right? Where it's like, well, we'll just do it the week later and we'll make up for it. And not that, the kid doesn't appreciate that, but just to be there in town, doing it on the day of, it's exciting, man. So it was a lot of fun. You know how those things go, man. It's just those special family times, man. You can't replace them.
I do know how that goes. Well, kind of a slow week coming up. We got Hill versus Dern coming up. Not a lot of fanfare. That was going to be on the UFC card. Then followed by a kind of road to the finals, Shanghai, the next couple weeks before another pay-per-view coming up. But anything before we get out of here? Any last thing?
No, I mean, as you said, that card this weekend, I'll actually, it's funny. So talking about families, I will not be at the fights itself because my family has tickets to the Savannah Bananas baseball team. I don't know if you've seen those, but I've only seen them on social media.
Oh, is that TV, the parody, like the Harlem Globetrotters?
Yeah,
I've seen those.
They're coming to Las Vegas, and so we bought tickets like months ago. So I'm going to cover fight week. I'll be at media day. I'll be at the weigh-ins, but I will not be at the fight itself because we got those family plans. You're right. I mean, the main event, Mackenzie Dern, Angela Hill, it's a meaningful fight at strawweight, like it is, but whenever something gets shifted from one card to the main event of another card, I mean, it wasn't originally tagged as a main event. So it doesn't have that kind of big fight feel, but it's kind of what we just talked about. It's still an important fight in the division, and it's still having fights. So I won't be there on Saturday, but there are some matchups on there that are exciting. I mean, Joaquin Buckley is back against Andre Fiallo. That could be great. Michael Johnson is back against Diego Ferreira. I mean, you talk about OGs of the game. Michael Johnson is one of those guys as well. So there's a couple contests on there that I think should be entertaining. And we have fights every week because that's what we watch. So I'll be watching that on replay. So I'll be hanging out with the family on Saturday. But yeah, kind of slow week. Usually this is kind of what we do, right? It's the end of school. People are starting to build towards summer times, and the UFC there's these kind of dog days that you have for a little bit, and then you start building to the big summer matchups for all the organizations out there. So again, it's like watching a regular season game or something here for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's Tuesday in February for like the NBA. Right?
That's it.
There's still a game going on, but maybe not. People aren't paying attention as much.
We're not worried about the playoff standings just yet. We just got to get some games in. We're going to have a couple frosty beverages and some popcorn and watch it play out.
Right, but I'll be sitting on my couch going, Saturday Night Live, UFC fights. UFC fights.
You know which one you're watching.
Absolutely,
you know which one you're watching.
I do. Well, another great show that we just finished up. You can go ahead and watch us on grindcitymedia.com, YouTube, listen to us, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Follow my man, John Morgan, on Twitter, JohnMorgan_MMA. Read all of his stuff, mixedmartialarts.com. Follow me for Out of Pity. I'm E_MacLife. Got a few new followers. Thank you, everybody. For John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.